to the Cards and Comic Show. Welcome back to Cards and Comics. Today I have a smaller mail day than my last Griffey one I just did. This is my vintage card mail day, and I've got vintage cards from both football and baseball. So we'll start here in football right away here. We got a 1955 Bowman Charlie Connery 8.5. Great color on these cards. I like the old Bowman football. Look really cool. Still good deals on these cards. A lot of Hall of Famers people aren't really aware of are out there, so I think it's something if you really want to get into some vintage cards that aren't very cheap or that aren't very expensive. Sorry about that. Football is kind of the sport to go, and this card has a little bit of an interesting issue is that it's out of focus. So if you want a really good example of out of focus, then this card will be it for you. You can see the logo. It's a good indicator of out of focus. So if you just want to see what that looks like, this is a good example of a card that's slightly out of focus. So it's an example for folks who don't know what that means. Just look at that logo compared to the Charlie Connery quarterback, and you can see how fuzzy it is and hard to read compared to the two. So that's a good example of a card being out of focus. And then here is the cool back. Again, these cards are really interesting and neat from that perspective. I really dig the 50s football cards. Moving on to 61 Topps, which, interesting enough, looks very similar to 61 baseball. Sonny Jurgensen, Hall of Fame quarterback for Philadelphia here. This is a really nice PSA 8. It's an old grade. You can see the old grade because it's one line instead of two lines. Just for people who want to have one point of reference between an old and a new grade, that's an old grade. Nice card. These have the rub back, so a lot of times the back's rubbed or slightly rubbed. The PSA gives a little leniency sometimes for a little bit of rubbing on the back, but just a really nice, well-centered, nice color in the background. PSA 61 Topps. Sonny Jurgensen. And last but not least, 66 Philadelphia Bart Starr. I like the 66 Philadelphia. The 66 Philadelphias in general are the hardest Philly cards to get if you're interested in pop counts and sets. So, like for example, the Jim Brown is a tough card to get. There is the back of the card. There's a quiz, some stats there. So nice green back, which really goes well with the Packer theme here. And the green on the front. So it's a really cool card. It's a PSA 8. It's actually my second second PSA 8 I have of this card, which is odd for me to have duplicates, especially in football, because I have probably 1/10 the amount of Hall of Fame football cards that I do baseball cards. So odd for me to get double, but it can happen. And there you go. So I'll be taking this with me to the National to maybe sell or trade. Next up is a really nice card. It's a 7, but it presents very nicely. It's a 56 Duke Snider. It is a gray back. There you go. You can see the stats there. Mr. Snider hit 309 with 42 home runs and 136 RBIs. That's pretty impressive, even by today's standards. Just a great looking card. Love, just tons about this card. These old 50s Brooklyn Dodger cards are just all classic. And again, I had the Jackie, so this goes really well with the Jackie card. And just really love seeing me get more 50s cards. That's I kind of preach that my 50s versus 60s Hall of Famer pop count review video. If you want to check that out, why I'm so passionate that 50s Hall of Fame cards are such steals right now, in my opinion, from a cost perspective, because of just the rarity of the 50s Hall of Famers compared to 60s Hall of Famers is fairly staggering, just as a general rule of thumb, across all years and sets. Just generally, they're a lot harder to get. And this card just presents really well. Very clean, nice colors, white borders, pretty well centered. 56 Duke Snider. Next up is a 57 Minnie Minoso. And in that video, I talked about how his cards are rare in most sets, and that's really attributed to the fact he is a, let's say, late addition to the Hall of Fame gang. And so the way it works is, commons are not submitted as near as often as star players because of the cost of grading versus the reward of the player being worth more money. Minoso was a common, or a, let's say a star, but what non-Hall of Fame star for a long period of time. Now that he's a Hall of Famer, people are starting to grade his cards more often, but in general, they have lower pop counts than other Hall of Famers from the same set. So therefore, when people look at the pop counts, they say, wow, Minnie Minoso is a rare short print in the set and a PSA 8 or above, and it's really just because there's not been as many graded. But it's nice to get Hall of Fame PSA 8s no matter what the circumstances. So it was cool to pick this up. 57 Minnie Minoso, and along the same vein, I picked up this 59 Don Drysdale. Nice color, nice gloss. I'll show you there. See, glossy. It's got a little, probably, a little corner ding there, and maybe the back will show a little bit more, but it's pretty presentable. That back is very clean. This card wasn't probably out in the daylight or sitting in someone's binder for a long period of time. This card seems like it was kept probably in really good condition, stored properly, because of the color and the white borders and just the back not being toned. So it's a really nice card for a 7. So I'm pretty excited to get this card in a 7. Even though, like I said, I'm a grade snob, so I'm mostly an 8 guy or 8.5, but that's still a nice card. But here's a Brooks Robinson, sorry, in that preferred 8 grade again. Grade snob on my way to a collection, and this one, again, is very nice for the grade. In fact, if you put the two right next to each other, since they're both that yellow background, they look good together. And some people would even say that the Drysdale has deeper color, and I would agree. That it has a little bit more color. This card, a little bit more on the borders, you can see. And then from a back standpoint, again, one of them has a little bit more toning. That's just how it goes. Sometimes there's some things you like about a card despite the grade, and I think this card definitely, but when you put it in the light like that, you can see it's got that nice color and gloss, so it's a pretty clean card as well. So I like that card. I love 59 set just because they are a reasonable price point because of the pop counts. Again, I kind of generalize that all 50s Hall of Famers on average are harder to get. But 59 is definitely the set where it's very similar to pop counts of 60s cards as well. So not a big premium on those cards, honestly, from a pop count rarity perspective. 61 Topps Whitey Herzog. I'm starting to pick up, some of the minor Hall of Famers, and what I mean by that is, this is a manager Hall of Famer. He didn't make the Hall of Fame because of his playing career. It's because he was a good manager. So their playing cards are considered Hall of Fame cards, but because they're in the Hall of Fame PSA registry set, but I don't really consider them to be Hall of Fame players. They're Hall of Fame managers. So is it the first manager's card you want, or is it the first card as a player, which technically is still a rookie card? Anyway, that's a debate for the ages, I think, in terms of set building. But this is in the PSA set registry, so eventually I may do a Hall of Fame registry set. So therefore, I just picked this up because it's fairly cheap. 61 in. Show you the back, because I know people like seeing the backs. All right, moving on to the later 60s. I've never had this card before. I'm really happy to get it. 65 Richie Allen. I think Dick Allen's going to make the Hall of Fame. I'm pretty sure he came close on the last veteran side of it. So a lot of people are speculating that he's going to make the Hall of Fame, so his cards have gone up quite a bit in the last 4 or 5 years, honestly. This is his second year, and love this card quite a bit, just because it's a 65, which is just 65s are very attractive cards. Nice back, not as deep blue as I've had other backs, but still okay. Card is a little off left to right. So it's off a little bit left to right, top to bottom. So it's not perfectly centered. So from that perspective, it could be a little better eye appeal, but the trophy definitely makes the card a lot cooler. 65 Richie Allen, really happy to get that finally. A card I've also never really owned in high grade, the 65 Pete Rose. I've never had the rookie card either. I've had a 64 before in high grade. I had an 8 at one point. So I've had some of the Pete Roses. I think I had the 66 as well on an 8. So I've got a few Pete Rose cards, but not a ton. And that's just because, honestly, he's not a Hall of Famer, for one thing. So when you focus on Hall of Fame players, he doesn't quite make that standard, even though everyone would agree that he is a Hall of Fame player caliber-wise and should have made the Hall of Fame. So, so he should be a Hall of Famer, but he is not due to his own transgressions. But, I just kind of ignored him because of that fact. But also, his cards are super expensive. And in general, a lot of the time, it's the most expensive card in a set. Like in his rookie card, for example, his 64 is definitely one of the more expensive cards in that set. So from that perspective, I just kind of just laid low on him. But this is a really nice example, even though it's a 7. And again, I might go back and get some of those Pete Rose cards as 7s or 7.5s, or maybe I don't pick them all up as 8s, just to keep the cost average a little bit down. Because again, I'm not a huge Pete Rose fan, but I still like to have his cards. Next up is a cool card for me. I like this card a lot. 73 Frank Robinson. It is horizontal, like a lot of 73s are. It's just well centered. It's just a cool card. It's an 8. It looks nice. Back's nice. It again is an old grade, so I think this card, would preferably be one of those cards that you could say has a shot as an 8.5, because again, it was pre 8.5 grading. Just a really solid card. That card is just nice. Like, it presents itself like hard to improve. I can't look at this card and say like I can point out 4 or 5 things I would just right off the bat say is wrong with it. It just looks really, really good as an 8. Next up, 74 Carlton Fisk. Again, a lot of people love this card too because of the action shot, the horizontal, and again, this card is a little off center, left to right, or top to bottom, however you want to say it, but it's a little off. It's got print dot here, so it's not quite as perfect as that last card I just showed you, but still very nice for the grade. Pretty cool card. I've never had this card before as well. Again, some of these 70s cards I just don't prioritize as high as 60s and 50s cards, but I'm starting to fill out my 70s sets as well, Hall of Fame set. So there you go. Carl Fisk. Now for the big card, the big dog. So I waited till the end to show the big card. I just want to make sure everyone watch the rest of my video so I can get a higher YouTube algorithms, even though my channel doesn't really ever factor into any of the algorithms or searches, because I can just see on my channel like it doesn't. But I did it anyway. So here's the big card, 659 Mickey Mantle PSA 6. So yeah, so this came up and I just loved the centering on this card. I loved the red color. We'll get into it. We'll look at it a little closer here. Now it does have print, so you can see right here, print, right there, and then right here. So that's the biggest distractor for me, technically from the grade, is that it's got some print on it. You can see a little bit right here as well. So to some people that's a major issue. For other people it's not. I look at it in this way for cards like this with in this, I mean, some people might say it's not print, it's just like, like you get some color issues, for how the card was printed. But anyway, I look at it one way is The card overall presents very nicely for a PSA 6, even with those issues there. So they're not that noticeable until you point them out. The card itself looks, like really nice for the grade, centered. Nothing that's you just call it majorly. The back is actually very clean, very nice back. So I'd say overall this card looks nicer than the grade. It's got some technical issues that you could point out and say like, okay, well that's probably why it graded the way it did. But to me, it looks great for that grade. And if I, like I did when I saw it, I'm like, well, that card looks nicer than a 6. And it's an SGC card, so that even lowers the value a little bit even more in terms of just how much I paid for it compared to a PSA 6. So overall, I felt like I got a good deal on it, and it goes in my collection. So this year alone, I picked up the 58 and the 59 mantle from my Hall of Fame collection side of it. So now I've got the 52 mantle, the 53 mantle, both tops. We got the 58 and 59 mantle. So it's I have picked up quite a few 50s mantles, kind of like as an accidental mantle collector. To have 4 50s mantles is pretty cool for me because I've talked a lot about how my 50s collection is kind of lacking. So there it is, guys. That's my big mail day for vintage cards. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what your favorite card is, and I'll see you next time on Cards and Comics. Bye.